Hi, this is Amanda Vollmer. Welcome to the presentation of my portfolio. First up, I would like for you to take a look at my writer's notebook. In selecting a notebook, I wanted one that would be fun and exciting and get me wanting to write. So I picked this fun gold glittery notebook. One of my first entries and several after that were inspired by activities in Notebook Know-How, specifically the What's in a Name activity. I started off thinking about my name and why it's significant and special to me. And then I included some about my husband's name. And then I wrote down some fun facts about our names. I also went on to write about my children's names because their names both hold significance in our family. And then I had a couple of pages that I started for my boys, just talking about some of the fun things that make them them. Things that I want to always remember and never forget. I included a quotes page. I love quotes. I've always kept a lot of quotes around, and I definitely am going to need additional quotes pages in my writer's notebook. I also made a heart map and included things that are special and meaningful to me, what makes me, me. I had a few pages of powerful words and words of inspiration, like my focus word of the year, which was persevere. And then I had several entries that had significant memories from my past, like golfing with my dad, and then the infamous May 3rd tornado that destroyed my family's home. I loved the suggestion to include lists in writer's notebooks because I am a list maker. I love to make lists and keep them and then go back and add to them. And the writer's notebook is a perfect place to keep those. I enjoyed sharing my thoughts about different things, different topics in my notebook. I had an I am page, and I've been going back and adding new words to my I am page. And then I included a page about being a mom to 2 little boys. And then I have several future seeds to grow, things that I've thought of along the way but did not give my full attention to yet. So I'm excited to go back and revisit those pages and include more details. In reflecting on the process of starting and keeping a writer's notebook, I learned that it's not just a journal, it's so much more. It's a wonderful way to organize and remember thoughts. There are so many possibilities for things to write in your notebook. I love the reflective quality that it has, and it helps produce meaningful and authentic writing pieces. I feel students would benefit from having a writer's notebook. I think we can learn so much about ourselves from the content in our notebooks, and also teachers would gain new insights about their students. And it would be a great way for them to be able to come up with meaningful topics. Now let's take a look at my personal narrative and the process involved. First up, I had to think of a topic. So I started looking through my notebook, and I first came across the piece about my name and started thinking about my childhood, and that was a strong possibility. But then I kind of moved on to thinking about my youngest son and all of the silly and fun things he says and does, and I thought he would be a pretty entertaining to write about. But then I finally settled on this piece. And it is an event in my life. The May 3rd tornado was such a significant part of my childhood that I decided it would be good to reflect and think about it. Once I got my topic, I sat down at my computer and I started writing. But I really wasn't feeling it, so I kind of put it away for a few days and came back to it and wrote a little bit more, but I still was not quite as into it as I felt like I needed to be. So I put it away for about a week, and I came back a week later. And boy, howdy, I could not stop writing. Just kept writing and kept writing. And it was time for me to write about this experience. After I got my draft written, I printed it out and I started editing it. I deleted words, added words, and changed things around. And then I had a final version I was happy with. So here is my personal narrative. May 3rd, 1999 is a day I will never forget. It was my sophomore year of high school. My dad had just driven home from being gone for the day for work. I remember my mom being rather worried because there had been the threat of severe storms reported south of Oklahoma City, the area he was traveling through on his journey home. My dad arrived home safely, but had reported they had experienced some bad weather. We lived in the country outside of Perry, Oklahoma, and my parents, especially my dad, always seemed to be weather aware. Back then, news stations primarily focused on the larger populated areas of Oklahoma and did not mention the weather in rural areas as much. Well, as my mom likes to say, the bad weather followed my dad home. Later that evening, it started to storm at our house, and the threat of severe weather was broadcasted all over the news. There was a large tornadic storm south of Oklahoma City and another one in northern Oklahoma where we lived. Our neighbors came over to our house in case the weather got worse. They lived in a nice modular home across the road from us, but did not have anywhere to go in the case of a tornado. This was a standard procedure when we were under a tornado warning. As the evening progressed, the weather got worse. Our power went out as the storm picked up. I remember sitting on our living room floor as I strung beads making a necklace for one of my friends by candlelight and chatting with our neighbors. We were all listening to the weatherman on the battery-powered radio, hearing about tornadoes in Moore, Oklahoma. My dad was constantly getting up and moving around the house. He would step out on the back porch to check the weather. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was listening for a tornado. At one point during the evening, my dad came back in the house and urgently told us it sounded like he could hear a tornado coming and we needed to take cover. I remember feeling very anxious as my adrenaline kicked in. My mom, dad, younger brother, 2 neighbors, and their son all ran to seek shelter. We had an indoor cellar in our garage, but it had water in it, so it was not used. My mom had cleaned out our hall closet in preparation for this storm, but there was not enough room for all of us to fit. I went into the hall closet with my 3 neighbors while my dad, mom, and brother all ended up in the adjoining closet in my brother's room. Everything around me seemed to move at warp speed. As the tornado got closer, it sounded like a freight train was violently rolling through my house. The floor was shaking unsteadily, and the door to the closet began to jar back and forth as the tornado wrecked my house. It only lasted a few seconds, but in the moment, it felt like it lasted for an hour. I remember feeling very helpless as the unwanted intruder tore my house apart. I could hear glass breaking as windows were blown out and wood creaking as the roof was sucked off. At one point, a very loud thud sounded as a piece of my parents' bedroom wall was torn from the main structure and violently thrust at the hall wall. It felt like we were under attack, and all we could do was crouch down and try to protect ourselves. Tornado drills from elementary school passed through my mind as we now were utilizing the duck and cover procedures I had learned many years ago. Bits of wet grass and dirt circulated around inside the closet, even though we were seemingly sheltered from the outside. Just when it felt like the closet door couldn't take much more strain, everything got eerily calm and quiet. The tornado finished laying its assault and had moved on to its next target. In the quiet that surrounded us, I began to hear a frantic pounding sound and a voice that was repeating, "Are you still there?" I immediately recognized the voice. It was my mom, who was having trouble keeping herself composed because she thought we had been sucked out of the closet by the tornado. I began pounding back on the wall and let her know we were all okay. My family exited their closet to find one hall wall had leaned over onto the other. My dad pushed the wall up so we could crawl out of the closet. As we made our way down the hall, crouching low to the ground, I remember hearing the crunch of glass below my feet and someone stating, "Watch out for the TV in the middle of the hallway." Things had definitely changed while we were hiding in the closet. We exited the house and tried to make sense of the situation. It was hard to see the aftermath because it was pitch black with no electricity. Things were strewn about, and there were household items wedged under our car that we had to remove. We could hear the sound of propane spraying into the air from across the road. Our neighbor ran across the street to assess their damage. When he returned to us, he said, "The house is completely gone and the car is in the pool." We all burst into tears. It was not safe to stay in the area, so my family drove into Perry to spend the rest of the evening at my grandparents' house. There was little sleep and many tears shed. It continued to rain and storm throughout the entire night, making it even harder to find any peace for ourselves. When the sun rose in the morning, the rain had subsided and we traveled back out to our house. Pulling into the driveway was a surreal experience. Our house was missing its roof. Windows were broken, things were scattered out about in strange places, and a random sheet from my parents' bedroom was hanging from our front porch. Things looked very disheveled. Upon entering the house, I went straight to my room. It was located across the hall from my parents' room. From their doorway, I could see directly out into the backyard and open skies above. I couldn't tell the state of my own room because the door had been sucked closed. I felt very nervous as I turned the knob and opened my door. My mind had imagined the worst. However, when I opened my bedroom door, almost everything was exactly how I had left it. There was even a $5 bill resting on my dresser untouched. I couldn't believe my eyes. There was such destruction right across the hall, and my things were perfectly fine, other than being extremely wet due to all of the rain during the night. The tornado had wreaked havoc on our entire property. My parents had parked one of our cars under a tree in case it held during the storm. The tree was no longer standing and had been uprooted during the storm. I thought to myself, well, at least the tree fell away from the car instead of on top of the car. As we opened the door, we realized the roots from the tree had broken out the passenger side window and shot into the car. At one point, my dad tried to pull down the sheet hanging from the porch, only to find it was stuck. The porch roof had lifted off of the supporting poles during the storm, and the sheet was now firmly resting between the two. As we began the process of cleaning up our property, many neighbors and friends came to our rescue. It was an amazing feeling to know we had so many wonderful people on our side. They brought boxes to pack up what was left of our belongings, food, water, gift cards, and many other things to help us. Boxes of our things were trucked to a family friend's huge warehouse and unpacked so everything could be laid out to dry. I will never forget walking into their massive building and seeing all of our things on display. It was such a bizarre feeling, like walking through a museum of your own belongings. We were very grateful to have items left to salvage. Our sweet neighbors had absolutely nothing left and actually came to help us pack up what was left of our belongings. That was a very humbling realization. The cleanup was ongoing for quite some time. One day, when I pulled into our driveway, I could see my dad through our huge broken picture window sitting in the middle of the house with a legal-sized notebook and a pen in hand. I entered the house through the window and asked him what he was doing. He told me he was drawing up new house plans. He knew we needed to find a builder and get a head start on rebuilding the house. On May 3rd, 1999, our house was just one of many that had been destroyed in the state of Oklahoma, and he anticipated a building shortage to occur. Because of his forethought and ability to overcome the massive destruction that had taken place in our lives, our existing house was removed, reconfigured, and rebuilt in its original location. By the end of October 1999, our new house was complete, and we moved in. More than anything, this experience taught me the value of family and friends, the worth of human life and relationships, are far greater than any earthly possession. Things can be replaced, but people cannot. In reflecting upon my personal narrative, I think that this was a really fun process when using my writer's notebook to come up with a choice. It was easier to write about a subject that mattered to me, although it may have been harder initially to get all my thoughts on paper. It was easier because it really meant something to me. I was able to produce a meaningful and authentic writing piece, and this experience was amazing. When I finally did sit down and I had the right frame of mind, I could not quit writing. And I feel like this process is something that our students need in their lives because I think they could experience the same thing. Final thoughts: I really enjoyed engaging in this process to produce my meaningful writing piece. I feel like my mind has shifted in thinking that every student needs to be on the same stage in the writing process. And I can see the many benefits of using this procedure in the classroom to allow students to be on their own writing journey, to work in their writing notebook, to select topics that mean something to them. I feel very inspired to continue writing because I have walked through this process, and I do plan to continue it. Thanks for listening.